John McCririck, famous for his flamboyant style and outspoken persona in British horse racing coverage, was never shy about voicing direct opinions, even those touching on religion. Although his public image often revolved around sports commentary, behind the eccentric hats and larger-than-life personality was a man who questioned the role of dogma in everyday life. McCririck felt that personal freedom mattered more than adhering to established beliefs. Fans noticed he rarely invoked spiritual motivations and instead cited practical, real-world reasons for his actions and stances. In interviews, he occasionally lamented what he considered the undue influence of religious institutions on politics and social norms, finding them overly restrictive. While some saw his approach as an act, many recognized genuine skepticism running beneath the showmanship. McCririck's candor reflected an evolving cultural sentiment that valued human-driven solutions over waiting for divine intervention. Though racing was his stage, his influence stretched beyond it, marking him as a distinctive voice ready to question everything, including the traditions folks often accept without a second thought. John Davidson's all-American image as a singer and television personality might suggest a wholesome, tradition-following background, and indeed he was brought up with standard religious values. However, as he delved deeper into show business, Davidson found that new experiences challenged the beliefs he once assumed to be universal. Constantly on the move, performing for diverse audiences, and interacting with all sorts of creative minds, he realized that morality and kindness don't depend on a single holy text. Davidson began placing more value on personal choice, empathy, and the sense of wonder that comes with artistic expression. In his interviews, he rarely condemned religion outright, instead emphasizing that each person must find what resonates with them. Over time, his focus shifted from traditional worship to the exhilaration of life's stage, a fitting metaphor for how he approached spirituality. The applause, the human connections, and the creativity he witnessed daily became more compelling than any strict dogma he'd inherited in his youth. Sylvester McCoy's role as a certain time-traveling doctor opened up a universe of possibilities, and off-screen, he also explored a broader realm of thought that wasn't tied to the religious norms of his upbringing. He started out in a context where Sunday church visits were routine, but as he immersed himself in theatrical and television roles that demanded imagination, he found old traditions less satisfying. McCoy gravitated toward the idea that humans should actively shape their destinies instead of leaning on higher powers for guidance. His portrayal of whimsical yet curious characters mirrored his own approach to faith. Question everything, adapt often, and never lose your sense of wonder. Over the years, McCoy's reluctance to adopt a formal spiritual label has led fans to interpret him as a champion for independent thought. Whether performing comedic skits or delving into darker storylines, he consistently returned to the theme that people can find hope and meaning in each other, rather than in rituals passed down through generations. Bernardo Bertolucci grew up amid Italy's strong Catholic traditions, but he leaned into cinema as a vehicle for grappling with life's big questions rather than looking for answers in the pew. His films often tackled controversial themes, political upheaval, intimate relationships, and psychological power plays, subjects that religious censors found objectionable. Yet Bertolucci wasn't aiming to shock for the sake of it. Instead, he believed that realistically depicting human struggle revealed deeper truths about society than church teachings often acknowledged. He became increasingly convinced that reason and personal morality could handle ethical dilemmas more effectively than strict dogmas. His willingness to explore taboo topics led to friction in certain circles, but it also cemented his place among Europe's cinematic greats. In interviews, Bertolucci emphasized that while religion can inspire beautiful art, it can also stifle bold, necessary questions. By challenging inherited assumptions, he championed a future where artists and audiences alike dared to reflect on life without relying on prepackaged, sanctified answers. Peter Greenaway's elaborate visual style marked him as one of the most distinctive filmmakers of his generation. He wasn't shy about integrating complex symbolism or references to art history into his work, much of which implicitly questioned the neat moral divides often propped up by religion. Raised in a culturally Christian milieu, Greenaway took a sharp turn away from orthodox belief systems after discovering the richness of world literature and painting. As he delved deeper into creative expression, he saw religious narratives as limiting, preferring to craft layered stories that challenge viewers to think beyond the obvious. Themes of mortality, the body, and identity fill his films, raising queries about human nature that are rarely answered with tidy spiritual solutions. Greenaway has maintained that curiosity and reason are essential for dissecting the human experience, whereas rigid doctrines can obscure reality's complexity. Though some find his work unnervingly cerebral, he consistently defends the idea that artistry should provoke introspection, not confirm comforting myths. Eric Idle's comedic repertoire is legendary, especially for how it skewered sacred cows and social taboos alongside the rest of Monty Python. From The Life of Brian to countless sketches, Idle poked holes in the seriousness with which many approach religion, mocking everything from dogmatic clergy to the concept of miracles. Yet behind the comedic jabs was a genuine questioning of why societies cling so fiercely to ancient rules. Idle admitted that while he appreciates the beauty and tradition of religious music and architecture, he sees no compelling reason to follow doctrines he finds outdated. Over the years, he's used both stage and page to highlight the absurdities of blind faith, all while encouraging free thought. Even so, Idle's approach rarely seemed mean-spirited. Rather, he wanted his audience to consider whether tradition alone is enough to justify beliefs. By blending humor with subtle social commentary, he made skepticism more approachable, reinforcing that laughter can be one of the most powerful catalysts for open dialogue about faith. David Cronenberg built a career around exploring the unsettling intersections of mind, body, and science. Born into a society with conventional religious norms, he quickly gravitated toward scientific curiosity and psychological depth, areas he felt were often glossed over by spiritual doctrines. Cronenberg's films like The Fly or Videodrome delve into bodily transformations and the fragility of perception, shedding light on the human condition without resorting to divine causes. He argues that when it comes to explaining life's most eerie or horrifying elements, religion often falls back on good versus evil cliches, whereas science and critical thought grapple head-on with messy realities. Though he rarely makes explicit statements denouncing faith, Cronenberg's body of work signals that human existence can be both fascinating and terrifying without involving supernatural narratives. By focusing on visceral detail and psychological nuance, he encourages viewers to confront both the extremes of the flesh and the anxieties of modern technology. In doing so, he establishes a cinematic realm where the quest for knowledge takes precedence over seeking comfort in spiritual certainties. Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn remains one of Hollywood's most celebrated leading ladies, recognized for her fierce independence both on and off the screen. She was famously quoted saying, "I'm an atheist, and that's it," a statement that was particularly bold given the era. Raised in a well-educated family that championed progressive ideas, Hepburn quickly learned to question the norms of her day, including religious customs. She believed that personal integrity stemmed from common sense and self-reliance rather than devotion to any higher power. Her refusal to conform extended to her fashion choices and her outspoken views on everything from marriage to Hollywood politics. Though some critics labeled her brash for rejecting traditional piety, she never wavered in her convictions. Hepburn's legacy endures as a testament to the idea that art, intelligence, and honesty can thrive without religious frameworks, an attitude that remains refreshing decades after her most famous performances lit up the silver screen. James Whale, best known for directing the 1931 classic Frankenstein, brought a distinctly personal vision to Hollywood horror. Born into a working-class English family, Whale once entertained religious notions out of societal habit, but his experiences in World War I and his immersion in the arts led him to adopt a more skeptical stance. Whale found the grand promises of organized faith lacking when weighed against the harsh realities he witnessed. Instead, he trusted in human creativity and empathy to illuminate life's biggest questions. His films, often steeped in Gothic atmosphere, subtly reflected his tendency to see the world in shades of moral gray rather than in stark terms of sin and salvation. Though Whale rarely trumpeted his non-religious views in public, recognizing how controversial such admissions could be at the time, he privately noted that he drew more solace from painting and theater than from any formal spiritual text. Today, he is remembered for influencing how horror stories are told on film and for quietly challenging the era's religious expectations behind the scenes. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich embodied glamour and sophistication, but she was also strikingly modern in her personal beliefs. Born in Germany to a relatively conservative family, Dietrich broke from tradition as soon as she found her footing in show business. Though she enjoyed the pageantry of religious ceremonies, she saw them more as cultural events rather than paths to spiritual truth. Interviews and letters suggest she found greater solace in romantic pursuits, music, and humanitarian efforts than in any church doctrine. Dietrich's irreverent wit and cosmopolitan lifestyle made her a symbol of independence, and she used that platform to speak out against fascism and other forms of authoritarian control, religious or otherwise. While her contemporaries often cloaked themselves in pious respectability, Dietrich openly discussed the fluidity of personal morals, hinting that rigid dogmas simply didn't apply to her life. Audiences adored her for the alluring mystique she projected on screen, but her off-screen candor about questioning faith remains equally compelling. Tallulah Bankhead, a Broadway sensation and Hollywood actress, was infamous for her quick wit, raspy voice, and uninhibited lifestyle. Raised in a prominent political family from Alabama, she encountered all the expected Southern religious conventions, yet she soon realized she didn't fit into that mold. Bankhead relished challenging social norms and found the constraints of organized religion stifling. She preferred intellectual curiosity and candid dialogue, once reportedly joking that the church cautioned her against liquor and men, but said nothing about women or other vices. Whether on stage or attending the era's wild parties, Bankhead showed little regard for preserving an image of saintly devotion. Critics labeled her outspoken and scandalous, but she brushed off the judgments. In doing so, she expanded what it meant to be a female celebrity in early 20th century America, proving you could be both bold and successful without relying on divine endorsement. Even decades later, she remains a larger-than-life figure who exemplified living and questioning on her own terms. Roman Polanski grew up in an environment heavily shaped by Catholic traditions, but his life experiences took him down a very different path. While his personal life is mired in controversial accusations that led to ongoing legal complications, his professional work almost always veers away from traditional religious interpretations. Instead, Polanski's films, such as Rosemary's Baby, explore the darker edges of human psychology, often revealing the ugliest sides of society without invoking the notion that a higher power will step in. In interviews, he's mentioned that the traumas he witnessed early on left him skeptical of any protective deity or comforting religious narrative. Polanski's characters tend to be ordinary individuals thrust into unsettling scenarios, forced to rely on their own wits rather than divine intervention. His cinematic focus remains on moral ambiguity and the fragility of the human psyche. Despite the heated debates surrounding his personal conduct, Polanski's approach to storytelling undeniably shaped modern cinema, continuously raising questions about whether we should look to institutions, be they religious or legal, for clarity, or instead trust our own perception. Larry King became a household name through his decades-long career in broadcasting. Though raised in a Catholic environment, sometimes misstated, in reality, he was born to Orthodox Jewish parents, yet he explored various beliefs. He grew to see religion mostly as a personal choice, rather than an absolute truth everyone must share. On his talk shows, he invited priests, rabbis, imams, and atheists alike, treating each perspective with measured curiosity. Rather than endorsing one position, he encouraged listeners to arrive at their own conclusions. King's style was straightforward, never pushing religion as a necessity or denouncing it entirely. He simply believed in open dialogue and let guests argue their cases. This balanced approach reflected his own open-minded stance, shaped by years of hearing every angle on faith under the sun. He acknowledged that spirituality holds immense value for some, but he questioned whether it deserved a monopoly on moral guidance. King's respect for varied beliefs, coupled with his willingness to question them, made him a unique figure in the media world.